What is good for the goose is good for the gander, as we say over here. The truth is that the Russians have decided to repay the United States in its own coin. The United States has now ringed China with long-range missiles. It's done the same with Russia. So both can be expected to repay. The presence of Russian warships and nuclear-armed submarines in Cuba, 90 miles off the coast of Florida, would once have created the greatest of moral panics in the West. Now it's hardly noticed. That's how far down the rabbit hole towards World War III we already are. No one that I have seen is much exercised about the fact that Russian warships this evening are looking at the lights of Miami, and that the obvious intention of the Russians is to arm Cuba with long-range missiles, the very same kind of long-range missiles that the US has now ringed Russia and China with. No one seems to have worked out that the real purpose of this really quite glorious and retro visit of President Putin to Pyongyang is not about Russia asking for things it already has from North Korea, but is about giving North Korea the ability, with its new long-range missiles, in this case nuclear missiles, to hit its adversaries. You know, the adversaries that occupied and raped it for centuries. The adversaries that are presently threatening North Korea, not just with a full battery of sanctions, the 21-gun salute of sanctions, but actually proper guns. The United States has threatened North Korea for decades with complete annihilation. The United States invaded Korea and killed 1 in every 5 Koreans. The United States destroyed virtually every standing building in North Korea in my lifetime. And the North Koreans aren't going to take it anymore. They have a war economy, a permanent war economy. They have millions of soldiers. I've looked at them. You wouldn't want to fight them. And now, thanks to Putin's visit, it seems certain that they will be tooled with the missile technology necessary to deal a blow to any and all of those who wish it ill and harm. Kim Jong-un, the North Korean supreme leader, has welcomed, he called Comrade Putin, to Pyongyang, and welcomed the new strategic partnership which the two countries have signed. It's all very obviously the march to World War III, and nobody in the West wants to talk about it. I know that because this day, in front of the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky News, GB News, the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, I laid out all the ways in which we are headed for Armageddon, but nobody asked me a single question about it. They asked me if our plans for a referendum on a continuation of the monarchy were in good taste, given that the King and the Princess of Wales have cancer at the moment. That was the level of the British media's interest in the march towards Armageddon. Where will it start? Well, possibly in more than one place. But let me choose 1 or 2 examples of where it might happen. Israel is about to invade Lebanon. And Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance movement, which has 100,000 men under arms and has missiles that can hit any and all of its adversaries, said today that he would attack Cyprus if Cyprus allows itself to be a base for Israeli aircraft to attack Lebanon. He said that Cyprus would be considered an equal partner in the war, and you can hardly blame him. Not least because there are British military facilities on Cyprus in a sovereign base in Akrotiri that are already involved in the war in Gaza. British aeroplanes, Royal Air Force aeroplanes, are flying spy missions for Netanyahu's targeters in the now 8 months of slaughter in Gaza. British aeroplanes are frequently arriving in Israel. Israeli airplanes are frequently arriving in Britain. And nobody, least of all the members of the British Parliament, are allowed even to ask, never mind get an answer to those questions. We're forbidden to ask what these aircraft are doing, what they are carrying, and to what extent do they mean we are now deeply involved in what the ICJ has described as plausibly being a case of genocide, the greatest, weightiest crime in the canon. And yet our parliamentarians, me included, are literally stopped from asking questions about the extent of Britain's involvement in the slaughter. But we will be involved if Israel invades Lebanon. We'll be involved because Cyprus will come into the firing line. We'll be involved because we almost certainly have special forces in the region helping Israel slaughter people in Gaza. We'll be involved because we're flying spy flights. And if we're flying them over Gaza, we must assume that we'll be flying them over Lebanon, and they may be shot down. Lebanon, after all, and Hezbollah in particular, are in possession of formidable anti-aircraft technology. They showed how formidable their drone technology is just the other day by flying over uninterrupted, with no alarm sounded, all of the strategic sites in Israel. And Said Hassan today didn't just threaten to wipe out Cyprus, he threatened to invade Israel. The invasion of Galilee, holy place, might be running with blood soon. If Hezbollah invade and capture the Galilee in Israel, this will be the first time this has ever happened in the history of the Zionist state. And only a fool would bet against Hezbollah's ability to do that. In any case, they have said that they will hit every target and every target behind every target, and the maximum targets behind that, by which they mean Israel's nuclear weapons facilities at Dimona. That's the facilities they have never admitted that they have. That's the facilities that house hundreds of illegally acquired, undeclared, uninspected nuclear weapons. Remember that next time you hear a hue and cry about the possibility that Iran might make one nuclear weapon. Israel has 250 nuclear weapons, and Hezbollah has the opportunity and has the technology to hit them. And then we're in World War III. That's Armageddon. I've been in Armageddon. It's a real place. And it's not far from Gaza. It's not that far from the Lebanese border. And we might all be heading for it, metaphorically speaking, over the next hours, days, or weeks. Not any longer than weeks, I'll warrant. That's one place that World War III may very well erupt because, of course, the United States will enter the war. Britain will enter the war on behalf of Israel against Hezbollah, which will be defending its own territory from Israeli invasion. It has done so several times before, every time successfully. So the Israeli armed forces, already taking a heavy attrition in Gaza, will not be looking forward to the sojourn. 70,000 Israeli soldiers have been disabled in the last 8 months in the attack on Gaza. We know that because the Israeli military have just announced it. We don't know exactly how many have been killed, but the ratio of wounded to killed is normally around 3 to 1. So we can infer that a very large number of Israeli soldiers have lost their lives. Many have lost their limbs, and even more have lost their minds. That's fighting a ragged-assed guerrilla movement in a Gaza concentration camp the entry and exit from which is entirely controlled by Israel. Just think what's awaiting them if they invade Lebanon. And if the US and Britain and others that have their naval assets in the Mediterranean attack Lebanon on behalf of Israel, who will attack them? Well, maybe Israel is hoping that that somebody will be Iran. And if that somebody is Iran, we must presume that the Americans and so on will attack Iran. And if they attack Iran, who will attack them? We must assume that North Korea, Iran, Russia, China will not sit by quietly while Iran is attacked by the United States. You see where I'm going with all of this? And that's only one of the pathways to Armageddon. The other, of course, could be the supplying of these long-range American weapons, NATO weapons, which could, of course, be nuclear weapons. How can the Russians know if the missiles are coming towards them, whether they're nuclear-tipped or not? The long-range missiles given by Joe Biden, along with permission to fire them inside Russian territory, hit Russian people inside Russia, destroy military facilities, including early warning of atomic attack facilities, could well be the trigger for World War III, or it could be in China. So, one way or another, you would have thought that all of this would be something of an election issue in Britain, in the United States, in France. The fact that it isn't is part of an organized conspiracy to deny the public in our countries from knowing just how dangerous a path our leaders have put us on. They are deliberately suppressing this news, infatuating with all kinds of trivia and balderdash, so that you do not know that we are very close to midnight on the doomsday clock. Talking about elections, every one of my opponents has now pulled out of the town hustings at which they would have had to debate with me. I wonder why. But it is part of a pattern all over the country. Labour are withdrawing their candidates from public view. They are withdrawing their candidates from public debate and questioning. That's because Labour thinks they've already got the election won. But they forgot Farage. Forgot Farage might actually turn out to be the leitmotif of this general election campaign. Because yesterday, 882 overwhelmingly young fighting age men landed on the beaches of the south of England. The British government didn't have a clue how to stop them. And the Labour opposition has no intention of stopping them. And that leaves the field open for Farage to whip up xenophobic, chauvinistic feelings in Britain, which are not entirely misplaced, because every one of that 882, every one, is tonight being housed at a cost of £80 per night per person in a British hotel. A British hotel near you if you are an elector in Britain. And they join the tens, scores of thousands of such overwhelmingly young men who are already here, who already landed on the beach, and who are part of a queue years long to have their claims for asylum and refugee status adjudicated upon. It's astonishing, really, on a number of levels. First of all, Britain paid billions of pounds to France to stop these illegal departures from French territory. And yet, the British news is showing French authorities literally standing on the beach, watching these illegal departures taking place. It's astonishing on a second level. There are no British naval assets, either able or willing or even present to turn back the tide. Why not? Because the Royal Navy is in the Red Sea, killing Yemenis. It's in the Black Sea, getting ready to kill Russians. It's in the South China Sea, getting ready to kill Chinamen. It's in every sea except our own sea. You get my point here? Britain's madcap, reckless foreign policy adventurism is allowing unguarded British borders to be breached by the hundreds, soon thousands, every single day. What do you think Farage is making of that? Our answer is we should stop invading and assisting the oppression of the countries from which many of these fleeing across the English Channel are coming. Stop the wars. Stop propping up dictators. Stop whipping up civil wars. Then you'll have far fewer people on the trail. But meanwhile, meaningfully, stop the boats. How hard is it? How hard is it? If it was me, anybody arriving illegally from France would be put on a Royal Navy ship and would be sailed back to France, which should never have allowed them illegally to depart in the first place. Only a fool, a liberal, a Trotskyite, an anarchist, or a big capitalist is in favor, after all, of open borders, of allowing anybody at all, to come by any means at all to our country. A country is not a country unless it has borders, but Britain effectively now has no borders, none that are guarded in any case. So Farage is on the warpath on this subject, and it's striking an echo not just with Conservative voters, but with millions of Labour voters, particularly in the north, particularly along the formerly red wall, now blue wall, perhaps about to get even more blue, by going lock, stock and barrel for Nigel Farage. That leaves me as the last defender of decency in British politics. Rishi Sunak's already on the beach, the beaches of California, I mean. Keir Starmer is clunking his way towards World War III on the orders of a senile dementia patient called Joe Biden, who may or may not reach the starting line in November. As I've watched them, and I watch them closely, over these last weeks, I begin to wonder if the Democrats can be serious. As John P. McEnroe used to say, can you be serious? Are you being serious? You're going to run a guy that poops his pants on big international occasions, poops his pants in front of the Pope, has to be led off by his wife, who's subjecting him to elderly abuse by dragging him around these public events for which he's clearly no longer mentally fit. If he's not freezing on the stage, he's bending down to facilitate the aforementioned defecations, even though he's still got his clothes on and even though he's standing next to the presidents and kings of the Western world. Can they be seriously running him? I think not. And I've been saying that to you for quite some time. And then I tuned in to the Tonys, as you do. And who made a guest appearance at the Tonys, wearing one of Colonel Gaddafi's forfeited, sequestered gowns? And I thought to myself, that's her. She is the Democratic nominee in November against Donald Trump. The rematch. A rematch the likes of which we have never before seen. It's only a theory. We'll test it with our American guests over the next hour and a half or so. Welcome to the mother of all talk shows.